Just 17 minutes and 14.2 million Americans watched the air in that Senate chamber turn ice cold. Justice Neil Gorsuch leaned forward, eyes sharp like a blade, and sneered, "Did you even go to law school?" Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She slid a sealed government file across the desk, like dropping a grenade in slow motion. Before we dive into the moment that reshaped the legacy and put an entire system on trial, if this story of courage and truth resonates with you, remember to like, share, and subscribe to Sahel and the World Story. Hit the bell so you don't miss a single moment of the fight for accountability. Now, let's go back to that morning. The Senate hearing room looked more like a stage than a seat of justice. The carpet was too clean, the light too white, and cameras blinked red, like bombs waiting to detonate. The low murmur of the assembled crowd died the moment the tally lights lit up. No commercials, no second takes, just the truth, or something pretending to be it, broadcast to every living room in America. This was not a hearing, it was a confrontation, and the entire nation was watching. Jasmine Crockett walked in like she wasn't stepping into a room, but into history. Her stride was slow, steady, slicing through the silence. Her midnight blue suit was pressed like a weapon, her hair sharp, her eyes sharper. In her left hand, a black folder bound in a single red string. She didn't look at anyone yet. She was saving that heat. Across the long, polished table sat Justice Neil Gorsuch, already in position. His posture was perfect, fingers folded, chin tilted just enough to look noble without having to lower his eyes. He didn't stand, didn't nod. He simply glanced up, stared for half a second, then looked back down at his prepared notes. His message was clear. I'm not here to engage. I'm here to endure. But Jasmine knew better. Smugness wasn't strength. It was a defense dressed in silk. And today, she wasn't playing defense. She sat opposite him quietly, no shuffling papers, no clearing her throat. Just presence. Solid. Unapologetic. To her right, Representative Ramy Raskin capped a pen twice, a subtle signal. We're live. Every word counts. To her left, Ayanna Pressley leaned in with a whisper. You good? Jasmine didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her stillness said more than words. The gavel banged, and the words echoed once before falling into dead air. This oversight hearing is now in session. Gorsuch smiled, not wide, just enough to register on camera. The kind of smile that could slice butter, or egos, depending on who was watching. He adjusted his cuff once. His watch gleamed under the lights. She tracked it for half a second. Timing would matter today. Viewership climbed. 3.1 million, 7.6 million. By the time the clerk began the roll call, the live stream had hit 14.2 million. Gorsuch looked back at her this time, smiling like a chess player who already saw checkmate. That's when Jasmine's fingers slid across the black folder, just once. No theatrics, no flair, like brushing the trigger of something everyone in the room hoped she wouldn't fire. Justice Gorsuch, she began, her tone steady as a rock. Do you believe sitting justices should disclose financial ties that intersect with their rulings? It wasn't an attack. It was the kind of question you couldn't dodge without looking like you were hiding something. Gorsuch didn't flinch, but he didn't answer either. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, furrowed his brow as if she had mispronounced something, and said flatly, "That's a layered inquiry. Let's be precise. Are you referring to investments or speaking generally about confidence in the court?" It was a subtle backhand, not a direct blow. He had already dismissed her. The battle had begun, and Gorsuch had no idea he was already baited. Gorsuch didn't flinch. He didn't answer either. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, furrowed his brow as if she had mispronounced something, and said flatly, "That's a layered inquiry. Let's be precise. Are you referring to investments or speaking generally about confidence in the court?" It was a subtle backhand, not a direct blow. He didn't just question her grammar. He questioned her presence, her place. The kind of dismissive move a man makes when he believes his intellect is a shield and his position a fortress. Jasmine didn't blink. "I'm referring to the public's right to know whether trust has been compromised by private interest. You've ruled on cases involving companies tied to undisclosed financial contributors. Would you consider that a conflict? The smile came back, sharper now, not friendly, but surgical. Congresswoman, I appreciate the spirit of your concern, but I'd urge you not to mistake political theater for constitutional scholarship. Just like that, the knife slid in. He hadn't answered her. He had dismissed her. Not just her question, but her very presence in the room. Her fingers touched the black folder again. Still closed, still quiet. But that touch alone pulled the tension tighter, like hands on a bowstring. She asked again, her voice firmer this time. Have you ever recused yourself from a case where a corporate entity had financial ties to your speaking engagements, book royalties, or previous travel arrangements? Gorsuch exhaled softly, like someone indulging a child. Recusal decisions are made based on existing precedent and personal discretion. I've always upheld the integrity of the robe I wear. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He said what men like him have always said when the truth doesn't serve them. Nothing. The room felt colder, not from temperature, but from posture. The senators leaned back, the aides stopped typing, even the cameras seemed to lean in. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. That wasn't her play. She only smiled, like she had just confirmed something, not for herself, but for the millions watching who had seen this dynamic before. A man cloaked in tradition, using tone as a shield and deflection as a sword. Let the record show, she said, evenly, that the justice has chosen not to directly answer whether financial entanglements shaped his decisions, but the question will remain for the public, for the press, for history. Gorsuch's eyes narrowed, just slightly, but enough. Enough for Jasmine to know she had landed the first hit, and she hadn't even opened the folder yet. Across the table he adjusted his posture and took a sip from a glass of still water. Confident, at ease. A man convinced the hardest part of the hearing was already behind him. He even chuckled softly when the next question from another senator redirected the heat elsewhere. But Jasmine didn't move. She watched, studied, waited. She could feel the pressure building in the room, like the first creak of wood before a storm shatters the frame. She had every reason to strike back, but instead she let the insult hang in the air like fog clinging to a battlefield. Let the country breathe it in. Let it sting. Then slowly, deliberately, she slid the black folder a few inches across the desk. Not open, not exposed. Just enough for the camera to catch the department seal, the word confidential, and a red sticker that read, "Do not copy." Gorsuch's eyes darted to it, then away, then back again. His smirk faltered. Not much, but enough for her to see it. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. The folder didn't move again. It didn't have to. Its presence alone was a loaded chamber, and Justice Gorsuch knew it. He didn't believe he needed to. He leaned forward slowly, spine straight, eyes half-lidded, like he was delivering a lesson, not a blow. And then, in front of 16.1 million Americans, in a voice calm enough to chill bone, he said it. "Did you even go to law school?" The words didn't land like a gaffe. They landed like a verdict.
The words didn't land like a gaffe. They landed like a verdict. The room didn't gasp. It went silent, stunned, cold. Even the gavel froze midair in the chairman's hand. Jasmine didn't blink, didn't twitch. The air around her didn't move. But inside, the temperature dropped to something surgical. Because this wasn't just condescension, it was strategy. Gorsuch wanted her rattled, humiliated. He wanted her to lash out, lose control, become the headline they all expected. But instead, she simply reached for the black folder, untied the red string with one hand, and laid it flat in front of her, like she was setting down a weapon. The folder was thick, heavier than it looked. A single sheet slid from inside, ivory paper, a Department of Education watermark stamped faintly in the corner. Jasmine slid it across the table, slow and deliberate, until it came to rest an inch from Gorsuch's hand. He glanced down just for a second, then the projector behind him blinked to life. No warning, no sound, just one line filling the screen like a scar across marble. Harvard Law Scholarship, sponsored by Met Alice Corp., 1991. The moment hung in the air like smoke after a shot. The crowd didn't react, not because they didn't understand, but because they did. Met Alice, a multi-billion-dollar healthcare conglomerate, the same company that appeared in front of the court 3 years ago, the same case that won 5-4, with Gorsuch in the majority. His eyes flicked up, then quickly back down. The smirk was gone. In its place, a flash of something rare. Recognition. Jasmine still hadn't spoken, but the projection screen spoke for her. Every senator was staring at it now. Journalists in the back row typed so fast the keys clattered. Phones lit up like fireflies. She leaned forward, her voice low but sharp enough to slice the air. "You asked if I went to law school. I did. And I earned every page of that degree while working 3 jobs and defending people who couldn't afford silence." Her hand hovered over the folder again. "What I didn't do was sit quietly while corporations bought my education in exchange for a future vote." Gorsuch opened his mouth, closed it. The chairman glanced at the document. "Is that authenticated?" Raskin answered first. "We have federal confirmation, sealed until this morning." And just like that, the question flipped. If the man who mocked her education was secretly paid for his, what else was bought? For a long moment after the projection faded, Jasmine didn't speak. She didn't need to. The room was still drowning in what it had just seen. Gorsuch shifted slightly in his seat, trying to recalibrate. The chairman called for a 5-minute recess, but no one moved. The silence wasn't procedural, it was personal. Because everyone had just seen the robes stained. And in that silence, Jasmine wasn't thinking about the file. She wasn't even thinking about Gorsuch. She was somewhere else entirely. Somewhere warmer, dimmer, harsher.
And in that silence, Jasmine wasn't thinking about the file. She wasn't even thinking about Gorsuch. She was somewhere else entirely. Somewhere warmer, dimmer, harsher. She was 16 again, sitting cross-legged under a busted streetlight on the east side of Dallas. Her backpack was open beside her, books stacked like bricks. Criminal procedure, civil liberties, constitutional theory. Her part-time shift at a gas station had ended 2 hours earlier, and now she was here, on the concrete, tracing case law under a flickering yellow light. She remembered how the bulb above her buzzed like it might burn out any second, how she'd read faster just in case it did. Across the street, her mother used to sit on the porch in an old lawn chair, arms crossed, eyes never blinking when cars passed. Jasmine could still hear her voice, clear as glass, whispering from the past like a ghost with unfinished business. Make your name louder than their doubt, not by yelling, by proving. She hadn't come from marble. She hadn't come from gates and legacies and legacy donors. Her degree wasn't handed to her, it was fought for, earned at midnight, one statute at a time, while her classmates slept in dorms she could never afford to visit. She remembered the day she got accepted to law school. She didn't cry, she didn't scream. She walked to the same streetlight, looked up at it, glowing dim but steady, and whispered, "They won't see me coming." Years later, during her first case as a public defender, a judge mispronounced her name twice in the same sentence and asked if she was the assistant. That night, she didn't drink, She didn't complain. She went home, opened up Gideon v. Wainwright, and read it again, just to remind herself who the hell she was. And now she sat across from a man who asked if she had even gone to law school. Jasmine blinked once, returning to the hearing room like someone rising from deep water. Gorsuch was watching her, arms crossed, eyes scanning for weakness, but there was none left to find. That streetlight version of her hadn't disappeared. She had evolved. She had traded flickering yellow light for a national spotlight, and still her posture hadn't changed. She leaned forward slowly, tapping her nameplate twice, once for the past, once for what was coming next. Then she whispered to herself so low the mic didn't catch it. Only Ayanna heard, "My name's louder now, Mama, and I'm not done." She remembered the fury she had to bury just to breathe in that courtroom all those years ago. She had graduated near the top of her class at Southern University Law Center. Not Harvard, not Yale, but no less real, no less earned. Still, to that courtroom, it wasn't a degree, it was a warning label. But she had nodded once and said, "Your Honor, I'm not here to decorate the table. I'm here to defend my client." And she had done so, brilliantly, proving to everyone that her degree was more than enough, even if it came from the wrong zip code. She kept the judge's reluctant letter of acknowledgement, not for pride, but for proof. Proof that to some people, your degree is never enough. And now, decades later, she was still in rooms where people smirked before she spoke, still sitting across from men who believed robes made them untouchable. But the difference now? Cameras were rolling. Millions were watching.
The air inside the chamber didn't shake. It tightened, as if the walls themselves were bracing for a truth they could no longer hold back. Jasmine had just dismantled the illusion of impartiality in a single printed email. And yet, no one expected what came next. It wasn't a Democrat who spoke. It wasn't an ally. It was Senator Matthew Klein, a Republican, a Harvard Law alum, and a former clerk to the very judge now sitting pale and frozen at the far end of the room. He had built his career defending the legitimacy of the judiciary. But now, as he leaned into the microphone, even his breath seemed reluctant. "I've reviewed the evidence," he began, his voice flat but firm. "And I can no longer dismiss the appearance of impropriety. When judicial appointments and clerkships begin to resemble legacy pipelines instead of merit-based selection, we don't have a court, we have a club." He paused, scanning the room, then added, "I support a full bipartisan investigation into Med Alice, the funding, the admissions influence, and any judge who participated." Silence. Total. Not even the clicking of cameras, just the sound of America blinking in disbelief. Even the anchors on Fox hesitated, unsure if they were supposed to attack or absorb. Jasmine didn't smile. She didn't need to. She stood quiet, composed, and let the weight of Klein's words settle into the bones of the room. Then, without ceremony, she began to speak. "I was never scared of losing. Losing is familiar. But I've always feared something deeper. That no matter how prepared I was, how valid my argument, how stacked the evidence, they still wouldn't hear me." Her voice didn't rise, but her presence did, commanding, like the calm before a storm that never had to shout to be taken seriously. Today, that fear ended, not because I screamed louder, but because the truth spoke for itself, and someone finally chose to listen. Her gaze cut through the dais like a scalpel. Gorsuch sat motionless, his fingers tight against the edge of his seat. He wasn't the only one exposed. He was just the first. Outside, thousands had gathered, holding signs that felt handwritten by history. "Justice doesn't require a trust fund," and "The robe isn't a shield." CNN cut to aerial shots of growing crowds. Twitter surged. Hashtags like #GlassWallCracked and #WhoHeard trended within minutes. Inside, Ayanna Pressley wiped her eyes. Jamie Raskin looked toward Jasmine, not as a colleague, but as a catalyst. The system had blinked, and the spell was broken. Now that the mask was off, what else were they hiding behind the robe?
The day after the hearing, cable news didn't stop calling, but Jasmine Crockett disappeared, not to hide, but to return. The day after the hearing, cable news didn't stop calling. Bookers from MSNBC, CNN, even late-night talk shows fought to secure a primetime interview. One offered a private car and a full glam team. Another dangled a 7-figure book deal before the press had even cleared the Capitol steps. But Jasmine Crockett disappeared, not to hide, but to return. 3 days later, in a small community college just outside Dallas, a substitute law professor walked into room 204B. The desks were chipped, the lights flickered, and the air conditioner made a soft knocking sound like a heartbeat buried under drywall. But the student sat up straighter as soon as she entered. No cameras, no applause, just the quiet tension of young minds trying to find the door out of silence. Jasmine sat down. No security detail, no speechwriters. She pulled out a folder, the same kind she'd used at the hearing, and began writing on the board. Judicial power versus public trust. She didn't mention the hearing. She didn't mention Gorsuch. She just asked, "What do you think happens when the people no longer trust the rope?" One student raised her hand, then another. Then the room opened like a wound, releasing truth. They talked about systemic access, about who gets to decide what qualified means, about the invisible lines drawn in ivy and the lives they keep out. Jasmine nodded, listened, guided, but never lectured. After class, a young man lingered. He wore a hoodie with the words, "Public Defender in Progress," scrawled in Sharpie across the back. "They said what you did made the system bleed," he whispered. "But it made me breathe." She smiled, not wide, not proud, just enough to show she understood. Back at her car, alone in the dusk, Jasmine checked her phone. Over 14,000 missed texts, a full inbox of media requests from 4 continents. But she didn't answer any of them. Instead, she looked at the fading light and whispered the words her mother once told her under a street lamp. "Don't chase applause, chase impact." This was never about being the loudest. It was about being heard when it mattered most. And now the echo wasn't hers. It belonged to everyone who had ever been told, "You don't belong." This was a movement born from a simple, unblinking truth. It started in a corner of room 204B, sketched in charcoal by a student who rarely spoke, a reimagined diploma, one Jasmine never asked for, never expected. Instead of a doctorate, the paper read in bold slanted ink, "JD, Justice Delivered." Beneath it, the artist drew a pair of worn heels standing on broken glass. That image made it to Twitter, then to Reddit, then to the world. A group of HBCU alumni launched a campaign for nationwide judicial scholarship transparency, naming it simply, "Learn This." The climax came unexpectedly on a live town hall, when a 12-year-old girl asked what she would say to someone who said she didn't deserve to be there. Jasmine didn't blink. She walked to a whiteboard and wrote in bold block letters, "I earned this." Then, just beneath it, she added, "And I don't owe it to anyone's check." Not all degrees hang on walls. Some walk into rooms and change them. The mockery had turned to momentum, and the robe had finally been forced to listen. If one woman's truth could spark a movement, what's stopping the next? In a world that still rewards familiarity over fairness, maybe it's time we ask, who does our silence protect? And who gets left behind because of it? If this story of courage and truth struck a chord, don't scroll past. Like and share and subscribe to Sahel and the World Story, where hidden truths find their voice and silence is no longer protection. Hit the bell because the next story might not just challenge power, it might challenge all of us. What moment in this story made you stop and think? Leave a comment. Let's not just hear the truth, let's carry it forward together.